Hey, what's up everybody? Andrew here again from the phone booth at the Hub So Shore in Mahone Bay, coming back with another Monday vlog post. So today I want to talk about passion and how important passion is as a part of getting any new business idea off the ground. But I'm also here to tell you that simply being passionate about something isn't enough. At some point, you've got to validate whether or not there's a viable business to be built around the idea that you have. And I had this conversation with one of the participants going through the Dream Business program right now last week, and it reminded me of the early days of Mashup Lab. And I remember that initial sort of excitement I felt around exploring this idea of Mashup Lab. It wasn't called Mashup Lab at the time. I had no name for it, but I knew there was something that was drawing me to create and build something new. And if you were around me here at the Hub So Shore as I was building that company, you'd see there was no shortage of passion and excitement and things that were really driving me to try and figure this out and solve this problem. But I can also tell you that simply being passionate around it, while that might open up some doors for you, it isn't enough to validate whether or not there's a viable business there. And those were the hard lessons that I learned in those early days, because passion can do two things. It can, while it drives you to keep going, persisting, where 90% of other people quit. Seth Godin talks about this in his book, The Dip. If you haven't read that, it's a really interesting read. It's about having that, it's starting something with a passion and desire enough to, fight through that dip or the chasm or whatever you want to call it. But it can also do two things. It can blind you from the reality of what the market is actually telling you. And secondly, it can distract you from doing the hard work of actually running those tests and those experiments and things that might tell you that your baby is ugly, right? So while it's so important to be passionate around what you're doing, fall in love with solving the problem. Don't necessarily fall in love with the current version of the solution. Because I can tell you from my own experience, those first 3 or 4 months, I had developed this solution that I thought was Mashup Lab, and I had a solution in search of a problem, and it took me a little while before I actually was able to subside the passion and actually start listening to what people were telling me, and really figured out, okay, there's some big assumptions I'm making here as a part of this solution. What can I do to minimally viably test whether or not I'm right or wrong about those assumptions? And I can tell you right now, a lot of the stuff I was thinking about in those early days, ended up being validated to be untrue. There was a lot of things that I just hadn't learned about. I hadn't put something real out there. I hadn't run those tests and experiments to really learn about who my customer was and where the gap in the market was and all of those kinds of things. So keep and hold on to that passion, but also don't let it blind you or distract you from figuring out and validating the assumptions that every new idea is based on. So if this is something you feel like you want some help and guidance on, we're starting a new cohort of the Dream Business program on March the 27th. So we're looking for the next 10 people from mainland Nova Scotia to go through that Dream Business program starting on March the 27th. So click the link below to apply if that's something you're interested in. That's one of the very first things we dive into is like, great, you're here, you're passionate about what you're doing, now let's figure out if there's a great business to be built around that great idea. So think about that this week, and I encourage you to keep passionate around the things you're passionate about, but also get to a point where you're validating some of those assumptions. And have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next Monday.